Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm doing another VG video. Because you know what, ladies and gentlemen? It's been a while since I did a VG analysis of a Pokemon, and people keep asking, and I like VG. Oh yeah, and Incineroar is number one. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Incineroar is the most used Pokemon on the 3DS battle spot at the moment. So let's have a look at why Incineroar's so gosh darn cool. Now, in terms of the stats here, it was actually doing all right before the change happened. More on that in a moment. In terms of the stats here, you've got a really high attack of 115, which is really quite nice. HP of 95, defense of 90, special defense of 90. It's a moderately bulky Pokemon. It's quite nice because it means you can either put your bulk into defense or special defense, depending on what meta you're preparing for, without leaving the other completely exposed. The one thing I really dislike here is the speed of 60, because it's not fast, but it's got the same speed as a Alolan Muck, and it's there in that not really great in Trick Room, but not really fast enough to be anything other than Trick Room Pokemon out of Trick Room kind of place. The good news is, if you do end up in a Trick Room scenario, you will still have an option with Incineroar, but it's still not one of the best Trick Room Mons. Now, in terms of natures, you can see here that people don't always use it, but it's adamant. You want an adamant Incineroar. Adamant really just builds on its great attack, and it lowers special attack. But remember from the stats, it's got a really high attack and a significantly lower special attack. It is an attacking Pokemon. You don't have to go adamant. Some people do choose to go brave here, putting your attack up and your speed down. Going brave really means that you are preparing for Trick Room. It is not the kind of thing you're going to do terribly often, to be perfectly honest with you, but it is an option you've got with Incineroar, but generally we go adamant. But then we get to abilities, and honestly, ladies and gentlemen, the ability is why Incineroar has gotten so gosh darn good lately. You see, it used to be that Incineroar only had access to Blaze. And look, Blaze is a decent ability. Your HP drops to less than a third, and all your fire-type moves are increased by 50%. It's a decent ability. But now it's got its hidden ability, Intimidate. Intimidate lowers the attack of your opponent's Pokemon by one stage, and in doubles it lowers the attack of both defending Pokemon. It's one of the reasons Gyarados has been so good. It is part of the reason Arcanine ruled VGC 2017. It's part of the reason Landorus T started the year as the best Mon and continued as one of the best Mons. It's basically the best ability in the game. So when you give a Pokemon that used to be pretty good and on the fringes of competitive play the best ability in the game, that's when it starts becoming really, really good. And that's why basically everyone uses the Intimidate ability here. Sorry, Blaze, your time is over. Now, in terms of weaknesses, immunities, etc. here, we can see that we have an immunity to Psychic, being a part Dark Pokemon, which is nice. And there's only 4 weaknesses here: Fighting, Ground, Rock, and Water, and none of them are 4 times weakness. This is looking good. You've got more resistance than you have weaknesses. You've got an immunity, and you've got no 4 times weakness. That, to me, says you're doing A-okay. And I should mention that being a Fire Darkness Pokemon actually really helps. It gives you decent coverage against a lot of the good Pokemon in the format. Pokemon like Metagross, Pokemon like Tapu Lele, like Cresselia, and so on and so forth. Now, if we look at the main moves here, Incineroar does have some pretty gosh darn useful moves. It's got Fake Out. Fake Out is a great move, it's a normal type move, and it doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but it gets an automatic flinch, as long as it is the first turn you've been on the field. So if you switch out and come back in, Fake Out will work again. This means you can buy time for your other Pokemon to use setup moves, or you can slow down a Pokemon that's a real big threat to one of the Pokemon you've got on the field. It's a great move that you see in a lot of teams, and it's nice that Incineroar has it. In terms of Flare Blitz here, this is just the fire move du jour. It's a fire physical move with 120 base power and 100 accuracy. It's a big bad fire move. Now, you do have a 10% chance of burning, which is nice, and you do have to take 1/3 of the damage you deal as recoil damage. If you are playing a set with one of those pinch berries, more on them in a moment, this might even put you in range of using your pinch berry, which would actually be pretty cool. So you could kind of end that turn with more HP than you actually started. It's also got knockoff, 65 power, 100 accuracy, dark move, but it does more damage if it removes a hold item. Get rid of your opponent's pinch berry so they can't heal, especially on something like a Snorlax that might be trying to use recover to get that berry back over and over again. Get rid of your opponent's choice specs, which they're trying to use to do extra damage, etc, etc. Low kick is generally the fighting move of choice. It does anywhere between 20 to 120 in terms of base power, and essentially the heavier the Pokemon you're facing is, the more damage you will do. Well, you've got things like Celesteela and Metagross that are quite heavy, but you've also got Snorlax, and Snorlax is weak to fighting, and it's quite heavy, so a decent move to counter Snorlax. Many of these sets tend to run Protect, which just gives you immunity for a turn, the most prevalent move in the game at the moment. And if you want a darkness type move that you're really just using for damage, Darkus Lariat tends to be the choice here. Incineroar's signature move, 85 power, 100 accuracy, and it's not affected by stat changes. So if your opponent has been raising their defense, you're still doing as much damage as you would have been beforehand. U-turn sees a little bit of play. It's a bug type move, so you're not getting that same type attack bonus, where moves do 1.5 times as much if the move and Pokemon are of the same type. But you switch out, so it's a nice move to switch out, and then of course later in the game, you switch back in and your Intimidate comes back. If you've got Intimidate, having a move to switch out and then come back in, very useful. And we do occasionally see Snarl. Now Snarl is a special move, not a physical move, but it lowers your opponent's special attack. Given that you've already got Intimidate that's lowering their attack, using Snarl to lower their special attack really can help your Pokemon to just stay on the field for a couple extra turns. Now, in terms of the item choices here, by far the most popular is Assault Vest. Almost 60% of people use Assault Vest with Incineroar here. This increases your special defense by 50%. But you can only use damaging attacks. A lot of the Pokemon that would be quite worrying to you, like Tapu Fini, tend to be special attackers, so it's nice to have Assault Vest here, give you that extra bulk. We do, however, see Pinch Berries coming up. Now, if you add up all the Pinch Berries here, it's actually 22.8%, making it the second most popular item. These are the berries that increase your HP by 50%, when your HP drops below 25%, which is what I was talking about earlier with Flare Blitz. If Flare Blitz puts you below 25%, then you go up to pretty much 75%. But we do also see some Z crystals coming in here. Darkus Lariat can be turned into Malicious Moonsault with Incendium Z, which has 180 base damage. If you use Darkium Z to turn it into Black Hole Eclipse, it would only do 160. And Firinium Z means that your Flare Blitz becomes Inferno Overdrive with 190 base power. So if you're just looking for a really aggressive set to do a whole bunch of damage nice and quickly, that's where these Z Crystal sets come in. Now, in terms of partners, as with all the Pokemon, there's many different things it would fit with. But if we look at some of the more popular partners here, we see Tapu Koko and Zapdos, that of course cover the water matchup, which is one of the most punishing things for Incineroar. You're weak to water, especially if they bring the rain. Having a nice lightning type attacker can really help here. You've got Tapu Bulu, which brings in grassy terrain, which helps to weaken Earthquake, which is important given that you are not standing up well in an Earthquake. Sometimes you might use a Pokemon like Salamence or Landorus that also has Intimidate, the theory being here that you just cycle Intimidators and just wreck your opponent's attack. If you're against a special attacker, that's not going to help, but don't forget you're a lot of the time going to be using Assault Vest here. So if you lower their attack with Intimidate while using Assault Vest to give yourself more special defense, you are likely to be staying on the field for quite some time. And Tapu Fini comes in quite nicely here as a partner. Amongst other things, it stops you being affected by special conditions with misty terrain. Now, you often also see Incineroar just used as a partner for Fake Out and Intimidate. You come in with Intimidate, you lower your opponent's attack, then you use Fake Out to get an automatic flinch on one of your opponent's Pokemon, and you would use this to help set up. So something like a Tapu Fini might come out and use Calm Mind, and you use Fake Out to make sure that either Tapu Fini doesn't get faked out, assuming you're faster than the other Fake Out user, or just to make sure that it doesn't get KO'd early by a Pokemon that's hitting for weakness and super effective damage and all that stuff. Maybe you use it with a Salamence so that they can set up a Dragon's Dance or a Tailwind. Or with a Gardevoir to set up Trick Room. Now, in terms of counters, I keep talking about Intimidate as this great ability, and it is, but you are a physical attacker here. So other Intimidate users like Landorus and Gyarados, for instance, will give you a little bit of a hard time. Similarly, water Pokemon are going to be super effective against you, especially if you run into a rain user, think Politoed or Pelipper. And then essentially you've got water Pokemon like you've always had, but then you also bring in the fact that they're now hitting for more than they used to. Don't forget you are weak to Rock here, which means Rock Slide users not only have a move which is super effective against you, but also has a 30% chance to flinch. If you're being hit for super effective damage and you're flinching 1/3 at a time, that is generally speaking a bad result. And of course, as good as Intimidate are, there are a couple of abilities which really do hurt it. Competitive, which we might see on Milotic, raises your special attack by 2 stages if your stats are lowered. Ouch. And a Pokemon with Competitive, think something like Bishop or maybe even Empoleon, who is a water Pokemon, will have their attack raised by 2 stages when its stats are lowered. You lower their stat 1 stage of Intimidate, they raise it 2 stages, so they end up better off than they were before. Now, in terms of sets here, the most kind of famous, commonly used set here is from Razor TCG. I'll pop a link to the Trainer Tower article where he puts his whole team in the description. But it is an Assault Vest Incineroar with Blaze. Although you could very easily run this same set just using Intimidate. It's got an adamant nature, as we would expect, to raise the attack. And then you see a fairly standard set of moves. Fake Out for the support, Flare Blitz as a big fire move, Knock Off because it's a decent dark move and it slows down your opponent, and then Snarl just to lower their special attack while you're using Assault Vest and you're lowering their attack to really kind of neutralize their Pokemon. If you want an example of an Incendium Z set, here's one from Zach Amerzian, sorry about the pronunciation, also on Trainer Tower, and you can see here that we've got Incendium Z, obviously. The ability's Blaze, but this was written before Intimidate was released. Nowadays we would just whack an Intimidate on there. And again, we've got Adamant with Fake Out and Flare Blitz, but here you've got Darkest Lariat, so you can use Incendium Z, and you've got Protect here, so you can buy yourself the odd turn here or there. You've not got quite the special bulk you had before, because you haven't got Snarl and you don't have Assault Vest, but you've got some slightly sturdier attacking options, and you've got the option to use Protect. So if we finish off with a few damage calculations here, you can see the kind of things we're talking about. Now, if we look at Mega Swampert here, we can see that under usual circumstances, no Intimidate, etc., you are just about surviving a waterfall, but you're not surviving an earthquake. The number you need in terms of EVs to guarantee survival from a waterfall is 56. If you go any lower than that, unfortunately, there will be a guaranteed one-hit KO. If, however, you do get an Intimidate off, given that Mega Swampert is a physical attacker, then you will be able to survive both a waterfall and an earthquake quite nicely. And once again, if we bring in grassy terrain, earthquake won't be doing very much at all, which is nice. If we move on to some special attackers here, have a quick look at Tapu Fini. We can see that Tapu Fini just really isn't doing all that much. If you've got an Assault Vest, even if they've got a Choice Specs, they're just not doing all that much, to be perfectly honest with you. Muddy Waters, coming in at a 5-hit KO. Even if you bring in the Rain here, it's just not doing a huge amount. And even if we take the Assault Vest off, it's still not something that we're terribly worried about. So as an attacker, we're just not particularly scared of Tapu Fini. We are much more scared of Kingdra, unfortunately, who will be doing a fair amount of damage. If we take off the Assault Vest and go for, say, a Berry, then we're in a little bit of trouble. But then, of course, let's say we're in Rain, as Kingdra often will be, no Assault Vest and Rain. It's a little bit of a massacre. If we put the Assault Vest on again, we're looking alright. And then if we take the Rain away, Kingdra just doesn't do all that much. Interestingly enough, if you want to guarantee that you survive a Hydro Pump here, the minimum EVs you need to put in here are 56. Assuming that you are in the Rain, you put 56 in Special Defense, and even in the Rain, Kingdra's not getting you, assuming that you have that Assault Vest. Now, if we look at a standard Tapu Lele, I am using standard sets here off of the Trainer Tower. Tapu Lele does very little to you. The good news is you're actually going to be getting a fairly easy KO with Flare Blitz here. And also your Darkest Lariat and your Knockoff are also going to get fairly easy one-hit KOs. So you should be looking pretty good if you end up coming up against a Tapu Lele here. Similarly, if we come up against a Mega Metagross, we're doing pretty good. Flare Blitz will almost get a one-hit KO. Not quite, unfortunately, because, well, Metagross is pretty gosh darned bulky. The good news is we can see here that Metagross, with Iron Head, it should be 4-hit KOing. So even though you're not quite getting the KO here, even if you use something like a Fake Out quickly, you should then get the KO with a Flare Blitz the following turn. And it should be absolutely no surprise to you that you destroy Tapu Bulu with Flare Blitz. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Incineroar. I'm a big fan of Incineroar. I love the fact that it is nice and viable and all that at the moment. It makes me very, very happy indeed. But I want to hear from you guys. Are you playing Incineroar at the moment? Do you have a particular set you would like to share? If so, that's what the comment section is there for. I should be doing regular VGC content now again, so tell me which Pokemon you want me to cover in my next video. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio. And do check out my other channel, Wassy Plays, for some more video game action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.